The paper bag crinkled softly in Robert's hand as he stepped out of the elevator. The scent of warm broth and steamed dumplings seeped through the packaging, comforting in the sterile coldness of the hospital hallway. It was nearly midnight. Margaret had texted him just 20 minutes ago, said she was craving dumplings, the kind from the small shop across the street. Even though she was 7 months pregnant and already hospitalized for precaution, Robert didn't question it. He simply went. Now, as he pushed open the door to her ward, the steam rising from the food met the sight that froze every nerve in his body. The moonlight spilled in through the window, casting pale beams across the hospital bed. In its glow, he saw Margaret, his wife, mother of his unborn child, pressed against another man. Her hospital gown was pushed down slightly, her hands tangled in his shirt, and her lips locked with his. They didn't even flinch at the pressure of her stomach between them. Daniel's hand rested possessively on her side, fingers splayed across the very curve that held the child. Robert's hand loosened. The bag dropped, the plastic soup container bursting open across the tile floor with a loud, wet splash. Hot liquid soaked into his shoes, but he didn't move. He just stood there, utterly silent, as the scent of broth mixed with the sterile air, staining the scene with bitter irony. Margaret jolted, her eyes widened, and she scrambled to shove Daniel off, her breath uneven, her cheeks flushed from more than embarrassment. "Robert, you're back already?" Daniel turned slowly, completely unfazed. He straightened his collar, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and gave a smile that chilled to the bone, casual, amused, superior. Only then did Robert register the face. Daniel. The intern Margaret had once vaguely mentioned. Young, early 20s, his skin clear, his hair perfectly styled. He looked more like a boy than a man. "Daniel, go," Margaret whispered, panic flooding her voice. "Now." Daniel smirked. "Relax, Margaret, it's not like he's going to kill me." He walked past Robert as if he were invisible, not a glance, not a word, just that same smug air clinging to him like cheap cologne. Robert's eyes tracked him, but his body didn't move, not yet. Margaret stood by the bed now, hands trembling, the blanket slipping off one shoulder. "Robert, please, let me explain." He turned his head slowly, as if just remembering she was in the room. The moonlight caught the edge of her face, softening the guilt etched in every line. The shadows on the wall behind her looked like puppets, twisted outlines of two lovers caught in betrayal. "Explain what?" Robert asked, voice low, mechanical. "That you were kissing another man, that he touched you while you carried my child?" "It's not what you think," she whispered. "It was just a moment. I made a mistake." Robert's lips twitched in what might have once been a smile. "You wouldn't even let me touch you for months. Said the pregnancy was too fragile, but him, you welcomed." Her eyes filled, but he didn't flinch. He stepped around the mess of soup and shards of plastic, walked past her, and stopped at the window. Outside, the city glimmered under the cold sky. Somewhere below, someone was being born. Someone was dying. His marriage had just done both. "You should pray," he said, staring at the moon's reflection on the glass, "that this child is mine." He turned and walked out. The hallway was quiet except for the soft roll of a nurse's cart in the distance. Behind him, Margaret's voice trembled with broken pleas. But Robert didn't look back. He didn't need to. 3 days had passed since the night Robert walked out of the maternity ward, leaving Margaret behind in a mess of fear, guilt, and moonlight. He hadn't spoken a word to her since, not a message, not a call, not even a glance when he stopped by the hospital to collect documents the next morning. He had stood in the hallway while the nurse fetched them. Margaret had called out weakly from inside. He didn't respond. He didn't even flinch. Robert sat now in his office, the floor-to-ceiling windows behind him casting long shadows across his desk. His suit jacket was off, sleeves rolled to his elbows, but he hadn't touched the untouched glass of water Melissa had left beside his keyboard hours ago. The scent of hospital antiseptic still clung faintly to his clothes, or maybe it was just burned into his memory. He turned his chair slightly, looking toward a framed photograph sitting on the far corner of his desk. It was a memory from 5 years ago, back when he and Margaret had visited Kyoto during their second year of marriage. Her hair was longer then, caught mid-laugh as cherry blossoms fell around her. His hand was resting gently on her shoulder. He remembered the way her smile used to make him feel like everything in the world made sense. That photo used to bring him comfort. Now it stared back at him like a cruel joke. They had met in university. Margaret was a literature student with big eyes and a soft voice. She wore oversized sweaters and always carried a stack of books pressed tightly to her chest. He'd noticed her in the campus library, always in the same corner seat, always with a cup of weak green tea. Their conversations began over shared books and late-night study sessions. She had once told him he was the only person who ever made her feel safe. He remembered believing her. When he started his first company, she stood by him even when he came home after midnight and left before sunrise. When his startup nearly collapsed from investor withdrawal, she brought him lunch every day and waited outside his office for hours just so he could see her smile. So when she said she wanted a family, wanted a child, he said yes without hesitation. The pregnancy had been difficult from the start, morning sickness that lasted all day, fainting spells, blood pressure swings. She was hospitalized twice in the first trimester. The doctor suggested full-time rest after month 5. So Robert cut his schedule, canceled deals, shifted meetings, hired a driver just to be on standby for her at all times, installed cameras at home to monitor her health remotely, hired a private nutritionist. He built her a nest and never once complained. Margaret became the image of a gentle, expectant mother. Her social media was full of soft-lit photos, smiling by the window with a book, cupping her growing belly under hand-knit sweaters. Friends would comment things like, "You two are the dream." He would like the posts, even if he rarely smiled anymore. Then came Daniel. Robert hadn't paid much attention to the new interns. There were always new faces, always young talent filtered through HR. He remembered shaking Daniel's hand at a company mixer, fresh out of college, overly confident, eager. Robert had forgotten his name by the next day, but Margaret hadn't. He stood now and walked to the corner cabinet where he kept archived files. From the back, he pulled out a slim folder marked, Employee Probation Files, Internal Use Only. Daniel's photo stared up from the page, cocky smirk, pressed collar, empty ambition. He'd been placed under HR by Margaret's request. The timeline lined up. Margaret had begun insisting on more hospital stays around the same time Daniel was hired. She claimed it was the doctor's suggestion, that her condition was worsening. Robert had worried. Of course, he approved every medical bill without hesitation. But now that he replayed it, the signs were too many to ignore. The nights she refused his touch, the times she said her body couldn't handle even a hug, the way she started flinching at small gestures of affection, claiming discomfort, and always, the hospital, the safe little sanctuary where, as it turns out, another man was slipping into her world unnoticed. Melissa knocked once and stepped into the room quietly. She had worked with Robert for years, never loud, never intrusive, just steady. Her brown hair was tied back neatly, clipboard in hand. She paused when she saw the file in his hand. "I had a feeling," she said softly. Robert didn't respond. He kept his gaze on the photo. Melissa hesitated. "Do you want me to handle the legal HR end? If you want to fire him quietly." "No," Robert interrupted. "He's already been terminated." She nodded. "What about Margaret?" He finally looked at her. "What about her?" Melissa pressed her lips together. "She still loves you." He didn't blink. "No, she doesn't." There was a pause. The air felt heavier now. Melissa didn't push further. She set the signed documents on his desk and turned to leave. "Melissa," he said quietly, stopping her at the door. She turned. "Find me a genetic testing clinic, one with private handling." Her eyes flickered, just barely. "Paternity test?" He nodded once. "Schedule it for the day the baby is born. Have them send a private team. I want no hospital staff involved." She didn't ask why. She just nodded. As she left, he picked up his phone and dialed a second number. "Garrett," he said, "I need you to track someone. His name's Daniel. Full name, phone, bank account, social handles, everything. And I want surveillance on Margaret, last 3 months minimum. Every message, every meeting. I want to know every detail they thought I'd never find." The voice on the other end said, "Understood." Rob. Hung up. Then he sat down in his chair, staring at the Kyoto photo. Once, he would have given everything to protect the woman in that picture. Now, he was calculating what it would cost to destroy her. Robert sat in his office, the blinds drawn halfway, sunlight slicing through the room like interrogation lights. The envelope on his desk was thick, uncomfortably so. Garrett had delivered it personally, just minutes ago, silent as ever, placing the confidential folder down and saying nothing before walking out. Robert hadn't opened it immediately. He just stared at it, his fingertips pressed lightly on the surface as if he could feel the betrayal humming beneath the paper. The weight of evidence was heavier than he expected. He knew what he would find inside, but it was different knowing and seeing. Eventually, he pulled the string loose and began flipping through the contents. Daniel's file was now expanded beyond what HR had gathered. Full name, Daniel Rivera, 25. Graduated from a second-rate university with a mediocre GPA, several short stints at small firms, nothing stable, a pattern of getting too close to female superiors. One of them had even filed an anonymous complaint, unverified, until now. Photos were clipped to the report, Daniel entering the hospital on days Margaret claimed to be alone. Security cam stills showing him waiting at the nurse station, room number highlighted. Then came the lounge footage, grainy but clear, her hand on his cheek, his arm around her, their mouths pressed together with an intimacy Robert hadn't shared with her in months. He turned the page. Texts, screen captures, messages from Margaret's phone, backed up to her cloud, easily accessed once Garrett cloned her login credentials. Come again tomorrow, I can't sleep without seeing you. He still doesn't know, he trusts me too much. Robert's jaw clenched, but the rest of him remained still. The only sound was the low hum of the air conditioner as it clicked on. He didn't slam the file shut, he didn't throw anything, he simply closed the folder, picked up his phone, and led HR. Send in Manager Koo. The door opened 10 minutes later. Koo entered, wiping sweat from his temple, clearly nervous. Robert didn't ask him to sit. How did Daniel Rivera pass background verification? Robert asked quietly. Koo stammered. It was approved by Manager Margaret. She said he was her cousin's recommendation. She insisted there were no issues. Did you verify that? She said she had already done the checks herself. Sir, you know she handles most of the intern intake. Not anymore, Robert interrupted. Koo stiffened. Effective immediately, Daniel's internship is terminated. Remove him from the system. Access, email, payroll, everything. Yes, sir. One more thing. Margaret's position in HR is revoked. She no longer has decision-making authority. All her assignments are to be transferred to you. Yes, sir, Koo said again, this time with relief. He had never liked Margaret's shadow rule over staffing. Just as Koo turned to leave, Robert's phone buzzed. Margaret, I need to see you. I'm coming to your office, please, it's urgent. Robert didn't reply, he just leaned back in his chair and waited. 20 minutes later, the door opened without knocking. Margaret stepped in, face pale, her dress hanging loose over her rounded belly. Her eyes were rimmed red as if she'd been crying for hours. Why did you fire Daniel? She asked directly, voice trembling. Robert didn't say a word. He leaned forward, opened the folder, and pulled out a handful of photos. He slid them across the desk. Margaret's breath caught in her throat as her eyes landed on the top photo, her head nestled against Daniel's chest in the hospital lounge, his hand on her thigh. She reached for the next one, his lips brushing her temple, then another, her fingers interlaced with his. You had me followed? She whispered, her voice cracking. I had you trusted, Robert replied, tone flat. That was the mistake. She shook her head, tears spilling. It wasn't what it looks like. Robert, please, you've been so distant. I was lonely, and Daniel was just, he listened. He made me feel less. Less what? Robert's voice turned razor sharp. Less pregnant? Less married? No, she whispered. Just less alone. Robert stood up, walked slowly around the desk, and stopped in front of her. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't touch her. You told me the pregnancy was fragile, that even my hand on your back might hurt the baby. You flinched when I tried to comfort you, but him? He gestured toward the photos. You let him touch you like that. You invited it. Margaret shook her head, sobbing now. It didn't mean anything. It was just weakness, a stupid moment. I never thought. Robert leaned closer. Be careful, he whispered coldly, not to harm your lover's child. She gasped as if he had slapped her, her knees buckled, one hand reaching for the edge of the desk to steady herself. No, it's your child. It is. I swear it is. We'll find out soon enough, Robert said. But until then, don't expect anything from me. I was scared, she cried. And you were always gone. You buried yourself in work. You didn't see me anymore. I was working to build a life for you. For the baby, you wanted a bigger house, safer options, better everything. I didn't want to fall for him, I swear I didn't mean to. You're not a teenager, Margaret, you don't trip and fall into another man's mouth. She covered her face, crying harder now. I was wrong, please, don't do this to us. There is no us. She sank to her knees, hands over her belly, shoulders trembling violently. Please, I'm sorry. I'll make it right. Robert didn't offer his hand. He turned, walked back to his chair, and sat down. Security will escort you out. She looked up, horror blooming across her face. No. Robert. I can't walk through the lobby like this, please. You should have thought of that, he said without flinching. As she collapsed against the floor in tears, one arm cradling her stomach, the door opened again. Melissa stood there with a neutral expression, eyes flicking briefly to the scene before glancing back at Robert. Security is waiting outside, she said calmly. Margaret's sobs filled the room as two guards entered and gently, but firmly, lifted her to her feet. She turned one last time toward Robert. Please, don't hate me. He didn't answer. He simply opened his laptop and resumed typing as the door shut behind her. The key clicked in the door of the house he had bought for her, the one with wide windows, soft cream walls, and a nursery still half decorated in neutral tones. Robert stepped in and closed the door quietly behind him. The hallway light was already on, the smell of soup wafted from the kitchen. Margaret appeared instantly, barefoot, her hair tied up loosely, cheeks pale from lack of sleep. She looked like a woman balancing between hope and desperation. You're home, she whispered. He didn't answer, just walked past her and into the living room. I made soup, she continued, following behind, holding the bowl like it was a peace offering. I know you haven't been eating at the office. I added ginger, just like you like it. Robert sat down on the edge of the couch, loosened his tie, and stared at the turned-off television. The room was silent except for the gentle clink of the spoon as she set it down on the coffee table. He didn't even look at it. Margaret sat beside him, careful, as if approaching a wild animal. Her voice was soft. I don't expect you to forgive me, not now, but I need you to know. I really regret everything. Daniel, it was a mistake. I wasn't thinking clearly. His jaw twitched. She leaned forward, resting her hand on his knee. Can we, please talk, Robert? Can we just reset? He looked at her hand like it was a foreign object. I have nothing to say to you. Her lips parted, breath catching. Robert, please. Eat your soup, he said coldly. It's not good for the baby to starve. He stood and walked away. Upstairs, in the master bedroom they once shared, Robert stood by the window staring into the night. His reflection was faint in the glass, blurry, tired, distant. Downstairs, Margaret remained in the living room, unmoving. His phone buzzed, a message from Melissa. Melissa. Just checking in, everything all right? Robert. As all right as betrayal allows. Melissa. You need anything, let me know. I'll handle whatever you can't. He didn't reply, but her quiet presence, even through a screen, was a reminder that not everyone around him was a liar. He remembered the nights Margaret claimed she was too nauseated to talk, the times she asked him to leave the hospital early because she needed rest. The text messages about Daniel proved those were the exact windows he had visited her. The same hours where their intimacy had bloomed while Robert drove home alone, thinking he was being a good husband. He pulled up a browser, opened the spyware dashboard Garrett had installed earlier. It was crude but effective. Margaret's phone was already synced, incoming texts, outgoing calls, location data. He clicked into her message history. Daniel. You okay? He looked mad at the hospital. Margaret. He's cold, not speaking to me at all. I think he knows more than he's saying. Daniel. You want me to come over? I'll say I came to check on the baby. Margaret. No, please, just stay away for now. I'll handle him. Robert's fingers hovered over the keyboard, unmoving. The sickness in his chest wasn't from surprise, it was from confirmation. She was still protecting him. He clicked into another tab, Garrett's file archive. Daniel's scandals were already compiled. University fraud, catfishing women for money, recorded voice messages from victims, deleted social accounts retrieved from cached sites. Garrett's team was surgical. Robert dragged the folder into a prepared zip file and uploaded it to a burner blog page, anonymous, encrypted. Then he sent the link to a few select journalists and social justice influencers with the subject: corporate intern exposed for dating scams and misconduct. Within 30 minutes, it was live. Daniel's name was trending in a small but vicious online circle, screenshots were being reposted, an old girlfriend came forward, adding fuel, the snowball had started rolling. Downstairs, Margaret knocked gently on the study door. "Robert, please talk to me." He didn't answer. "I'll do anything," she said through the wood. "Please, just don't hate me." He opened the dashboard again and watched her phone light up. "Margaret, I think he's punishing you through me. Maybe you should leave the city for a bit. Just until things calm down." His lips curled. She still didn't get it. He wasn't punishing Daniel through her. He was punishing both of them. The next morning, Margaret greeted him with coffee and silence. Her eyes were puffy. She had barely slept. Still, she acted like a dutiful wife, setting the table, laying out vitamins, adjusting the cushions. Everything was mechanical, controlled panic beneath a fragile smile. When he picked up his phone, she froze. "I haven't contacted him," she blurted. "I promise, I deleted his number." Robert locked eyes with her. "Did I ask?" She bit her lip. "I just wanted you to know." He picked up his jacket and walked out without another word. At the office, Melissa was already waiting with 2 reports in hand. She placed one on his desk quietly. "No media trace to us yet. The blog is still listed as anonymous, but people are starting to recognize Daniel's face. It won't be long." Robert gave a nod of approval. Melissa paused. "And Margaret?" "She's breaking," he said flatly. Melissa hesitated. "And you? How are you?" Robert didn't answer. He turned to the window, where sunlight glinted off the glass towers outside. Melissa placed the second file down. "This is the hospital's paternity coordination form. I pre-filled everything. Once the baby is born, the test can be completed same day." He gave her a brief glance. "Thank you." She nodded. Dead and left without another word. That night, Margaret was curled on the couch, a blanket over her knees. The television was on, playing a drama neither of them were watching. Her phone buzzed once, then again. She reached for it quickly, then looked up, panicked, realizing Robert was in the room. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. She stood, nearly stumbling, and ran upstairs. He waited 10 seconds, then opened the spyware feed. A new text thread appeared. "Daniel. They're trying to ruin me. I've been suspended. Everyone knows. You need to say something." "Margaret. I can't. He's watching everything. He'll know. I'm scared, Daniel." "Daniel. Then do something. Say it wasn't true. Say we were just friends. Say anything." Robert closed the screen. He had seen enough. The final wave would come soon. Margaret's face was pale every morning now. Her hands shook when she poured tea. She barely touched her food. She was beginning to understand. This wasn't just about Daniel anymore, it was about her, and he wasn't going to stop until she felt every ounce of what she had made him feel. Daniel's name was everywhere. His face, once smug and unbothered, now plastered across blog posts, reaction videos, and Twitter threads filled with venom. Every scam, every fake relationship, every alias he'd used to manipulate women for money, exposed. Comment sections flooded with anger. Girls he had ghosted reappeared, receipts, voice notes, bank transfers. He was trending, not in fame, but infamy. And it was all Robert's orchestration. The digital storm was precise, cold, calculated, ruthless. And it had only just begun. By the 3rd day of the scandal, a news crew showed up outside Daniel's last known address. Protesters gathered online to boycott companies where he had interned. Anonymous users leaked details about his family. His father's place of work was spammed with complaint emails. His mother's contact number was posted online. Robert watched from his office, sipping dark coffee, the screen reflecting back the chaos he'd crafted. He didn't smile, he just read the headlines in silence. Behind him, the door burst open. Margaret stood there, face pale, lips trembling. Her hair was disheveled, her breath shallow. She clutched her phone like it was burning in her hand. "You did this," she said. Robert didn't deny it. His family is being threatened, his house, people are vandalizing it. Do you have any idea what you've done? He stood, slowly. Margaret stepped back instinctively. You defended your lover, he said, voice low. Now defend him to the world. Her eyes widened. I'm not defending him, his family didn't do anything. His parents didn't know, they don't deserve this. Robert walked toward her, eyes locked on hers. And I did? He asked. She shook her head. Robert. He raised his hand and struck her across the face. The sound cracked in the air like a whip. Margaret stumbled, a hand to her cheek, eyes wide in disbelief. She wasn't crying, not yet. But her lips quivered and her voice came out hollow. You hit me. You betrayed me, he replied. Silence fell. In the stillness, her phone vibrated again. A new message, another update, another name calling Daniel a monster. She looked up, eyes red. I told you. We never slept together. Robert laughed, a bitter, soulless sound. He pulled his phone from his pocket, opened the secure archive, and tossed it onto the table in front of her. On the screen, a video played. Hospital lounge. Daniel's hand under the blanket. Margaret's body arched slightly, her fingers in his hair, her lips parted. Robert didn't say a word. The audio played softly, whispers, giggles, the sound of surrender. Margaret's legs gave out beneath her. She fell to her knees. We didn't. I didn't. She mumbled, more to herself than him. You think this makes it better? Robert asked. That if you didn't spread your legs, you're still clean? He kissed your pregnant belly. He touched the child you told me was too fragile for my hands. Margaret curled into herself on the floor, holding her stomach. It was just a mistake. No, Robert said. It was a choice. That night, Robert didn't go home. He stayed at the penthouse apartment he'd kept for emergency meetings. Melissa sent him updates. Blog stats, new articles. Growing outrage. The next morning, his phone lit up with a notification, anonymous confession post by Daniel Rivera. He opened it. It was exactly what he expected. A long paragraph, clearly written under pressure. Daniel confessed to inappropriate behavior with a married woman, denied sleeping with her, but admitted to an emotional relationship and apologized vaguely to anyone hurt by his actions. It didn't mention Margaret by name, but the internet had already connected the dots. Robert forwarded the post to Margaret without comment. She saw it while having breakfast. The toast slipped from her hand. Her lips moved, but no sound came. Her breathing quickened. Then the glass fell. She collapsed. The maid screamed. Robert's driver was already outside. He received the emergency call mid-meeting. By the time he arrived at the hospital, Margaret was sedated, monitors beeped steadily, the doctor approached with tight lips. She's under extreme emotional distress, her blood pressure is unstable, we managed to prevent early labor, for now. Robert looked through the glass panel of her room. Margaret lay in the bed, frail, smaller than he remembered. She clutched her stomach even in sleep, as if trying to hold herself together from the outside in. He didn't go in. Instead, he walked down the hallway, pulled out a cigarette, and lit it under the no smoking sign near the emergency exit. His phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. Daniel. She fainted. I saw the message. Why did you make me post that? I kept her name out of it. That was our deal. Robert replied with one word, deal's off. He slid the phone back into his pocket and took a long drag. Margaret woke up an hour later. He stood at the foot of her bed. Her voice was barely audible. You made him do that. Yes. Why? He said nothing. I'm already broken. What more do you want from me? Robert stepped forward, arms crossed. You still don't get it. She looked up at him with red eyes, wet lashes clinging together. I didn't fall in love with him, she whispered. Robert stared at her a long moment. Then why did you betray me? She didn't answer. She couldn't, and he didn't need her to. It was 2 weeks before her due date when Robert got the call. Mr. Robert, the hospital nurse said calmly, your wife is in active labor, we've moved her into the delivery suite. He stared at the screen for a long time after the call ended. No movement, no change of expression. His desk was spotless, every file aligned, the city skyline glowing behind him. He didn't move. He didn't go. Instead, he poured himself a glass of water, sat back in his chair, and resumed reading a quarterly report. 3 hours later, a text came in from Melissa. "It's a boy, healthy, 7 pounds. Robert didn't reply. The next morning, he arrived at the hospital, not to see Margaret, but to collect the newborn for testing. The baby was sleeping in a sterile white bassinet when he entered the neonatal room. The nurse glanced at him nervously, recognizing him immediately. "Would you like to hold him, sir?" "No, just do the swab." She hesitated, then carefully ran the cotton-tipped tool along the baby's cheek. The infant stirred but didn't wake. Robert watched the whole process silently. Margaret was awake when he passed her room. She saw him through the narrow glass pane. "Robert," she whispered, voice raw. "Please, come in." He didn't even slow down. He left the hospital the same way he came, in silence. 2 days later, the paternity test arrived. The envelope lay flat on his desk, its contents concise and clinical. Probability of paternity, 99.9999%. Conclusion, Robert Lynn is the biological father. He lit a cigarette and leaned back, watching the slow trail of smoke rise into the ceiling. The test confirmed what he already knew, but it changed nothing. That evening, he returned to the hospital, not as a husband, but as a father. Margaret was holding the baby in her arms when he entered, her face lit up in tentative hope. "I knew it," she said softly. "He's yours. I told you, Robert, I never." He cut her off. "I'll raise him." She blinked. "What?" "The child will stay with me. I'll provide for him. Give him the name, the life he deserves." But I'm his mother. And nothing more," he said, voice like granite. "You lost the right to be a wife the moment you chose another man." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "Robert, please, don't do this. I love you. I was wrong. I've said it 100 times. Please. You don't deserve forgiveness." He turned to leave. "I won't sign," she said behind him, voice trembling. "The divorce papers. I won't sign them. You can't make me." He paused, then walked out without a word. 3 days after she was discharged, the lawyers arrived at the house. She still refused to sign, and so Robert signed something else. A private media agreement. The footage, grainy and blurred but unmistakably intimate, of Margaret and Daniel kissing in the hospital lounge was posted anonymously on a curated blog. No names were used, no faces were clearly shown. But anyone who had seen Margaret's social posts during her pregnancy could put 2 and 2 together. The backlash was immediate. "Isn't that the Lynn Corp CEO's wife? She cheated while pregnant? During hospitalization, with a subordinate?" By noon, it had made local trending lists. By evening, Margaret's name was circulating in comment sections. The next morning, she showed up at the Lynn Corporation lobby, clutching the baby. Security tried to turn her away, but she held the child tighter, tears streaming down her face. "I just want to talk to him. I'm still his wife. Let me see him." Cameras outside caught it all, the glass doors, the baby's blanket, her swollen, exhausted eyes, her voice cracking in panic as security tried to escort her away. Robert stood by his office window, 30 floors above, watching it unfold. Melissa entered quietly behind him, tablet in hand. "She's refusing to leave, the press is starting to gather outside." He didn't speak. "She's pleading with security, crying, people are recording." Still, nothing. Melissa hesitated. "Would you like me to go down there?" "No." He turned slightly, his gaze still fixed on the pitiful scene below. "This is the price of betrayal." And then he walked back to his desk. It happened quietly, the way most irreversible things do. Robert received the call at noon. "Mr. Robert, it's about Margaret," the officer said. "There was an incident." She had shown up at Daniel's apartment unannounced, her eyes wild, hair undone, still wearing the same cardigan she'd been filmed crying in days earlier. Daniel had opened the door reluctantly. Neighbors later said they heard shouting. 15 minutes in, a scream. Then silence. Then more screaming. Margaret had brought a knife. She slashed at Daniel's arm first, missing his throat by inches. He shoved her off, but she came back. Desperate, wild. As if hurting him could undo what she had become. In the chaos, she turned the blade on herself. The building manager found them both. Daniel screaming, blood on his sleeve. Margaret collapsed on the living room floor, her own blood soaking into the carpet. Robert arrived at the ICU hours later. He wasn't there for grief. He was there for closure. She was unconscious, hooked up to monitors and tubes. The machine's beeping was soft, but steady. A doctor met him at the door. "She's in critical condition. There's a lot of internal damage. We stopped the bleeding, but we can't guarantee anything." He looked through the window. She was thinner than before, smaller, her face sunken, a woman unraveling at the seams. "I just need a minute," he said. The doctor stepped aside. Robert didn't go inside. He stood on the other side of the glass, hands in his pockets. There was no rage left in him now, no fire, no pity, just silence. The nurse entered the room briefly to adjust her IV. Margaret stirred, just slightly, her eyes fluttering open for a moment, her gaze drifted toward the window. She saw him. Their eyes met through the glass. It lasted seconds. He didn't move. Later that night, a message arrived on his phone. Unknown number. One line. "I'm sorry, I love you. H." He stared at it for a long moment, then deleted it without reading again. The next morning, Margaret was gone. The hospital called at 5:42 a.m. There had been a second rupture internally. They couldn't stop it in time. She passed in her sleep. They asked if he wanted to make arrangements. He said no. She had her parents, let them handle it. He didn't go to the funeral. Instead, he went home, where the nanny was feeding the baby in the living room. The child, his son, was calm, watching the spinning mobile above his bassinet with wide, unblinking eyes. Robert stepped into the nursery alone after the nanny left. He stood beside the crib, hands resting on the rail, watching the infant breathe. He looked nothing like her. And yet, somewhere in the shape of his nose, the softness of his skin, there were shadows of Margaret, traces of what she once was, before the hospital, before the intern, before the betrayal. He didn't hate the child for it, it wasn't his fault, and he would never let the world make him suffer for her mistakes. He would give him everything. He would protect him from everything. Even love. Weeks passed. The scandal died down. People moved on. Daniel left the city, broken, limping, reputation destroyed. Robert never heard from him again. One evening, Melissa handed him a folder with potential nanny schools, quiet recommendations for childcare staff, background checked and sterilized. She didn't speak of Margaret, she didn't ask if Robert was okay. He appreciated that more than he could say. In the quiet hours of the night, Robert often sat in the nursery after his son fell asleep. No lights, just the hum of the baby monitor, the gentle rise and fall of breath. It was in these moments he would remember the early days. The way Margaret used to cling to his arm in bookstores. The soft way she laughed in bed when they were young. The way she cried the first time she saw their child on an ultrasound screen. He would remember them, then erase them. Because love, he'd realized, was a myth. A fragile illusion made up of expectations and borrowed time. But betrayal? That was real. That had weight. That left scars. He looked at his son, sleeping peacefully, and whispered into the stillness, "You'll never have to question what loyalty means. I'll show you." A month later, he began dating again, casually, politely, emotionally vacant. He smiled when he had to, made small talk, paid the bills. But the version of Robert that had once brought Margaret dumplings at midnight. He was dead and buried. Somewhere between the spilled soup and the moonlight that exposed her affair. Now, there was only what remained: purpose, control, calculation. He didn't chase love. He conquered time, and behind every decision he made, behind every measured word, there was silence where Margaret's name used to be. She faded, like perfume after a storm. Forgotten by the world, erased by the man she once thought would never stop loving her. But her betrayal, that would stay with him. forever engraved.